Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello readers, happy belated Valentine's Day, and welcome to episode 24 of Fully Booked. I'm your host Natalie, and today's episode is going to be book recommendations for your fave rom-coms. Now, I don't know about all of you listening, but I have always been a fan of Valentine's Day, even when I was single, and I love any opportunity to spend time with my cherished friends and our family and show them all my love and appreciation that I have for them. In addition, you guys already know by now, especially from last week's episode, how much I love romance novels. So, it shouldn't be a surprise how much I also love rom-com movies. I've seen my fair share of all the classic and modern rom-coms, so I thought, why not do a Read This If You Like episode? Now, disclaimer before we dive into today's picks that obviously there are a million movies and books out there that I could have chosen to talk about today. However, I found it quite hard to find books that overall fit the tone of some of my beloved rom-coms, and I wanted to give you guys the best recommendations possible. Plus, maybe I'll do a part 2 if you guys want to hear more recommendations in the future. Also, note that the books I picked do not perfectly fit the movie I paired them with, but I picked books that had a similar enough tone, premise, or some sort of connection to the movie. And final note, I know, I'm getting there. I'm not going to go over the premises of each movie in that much detail, so if you aren't familiar with these movies, feel free to go watch on your own time or just go look up the summary if you don't have that much time to watch movies like I currently do. Alright, enough of all that. Let's get into my Read This If You Like rom-com edition. Alright, so I'm starting with a classic, and that is When Harry Met Sally, with my book recommendation being You Again by Kate Goldbeck. Now, if you're someone who keeps up with the releases in the publishing industry, you might have seen a lot of people post about this book last year and the year before, so back in 2023 when I believe it was originally released. And I definitely agree with the critics in that it has some of the feel of When Harry Met Sally, because this story also takes place in New York, and the initial premise of how they meet is very similar to the beginning of the movie, where they meet by chance multiple times across the span of years before finally becoming friends. And then, of course, that progresses into an eventual romance. Other than that, I would say this book is actually very different in that the dialogue is nothing like the movie. It's more fast-paced and bantery as to be expected from a book that is kind of a mix of a rom-com, kind of contemporary romance. And Ari and Josh are nothing like Sally and Harry. Ari is a commitment phobe who's trying to make it in stand-up comedy, and she's also bisexual, whereas Josh is a successful chef who is a serial monogamist in this story. So if you have already seen the movie, then you'll know. These two are nothing like Sally and Harry. Although, if I remember correctly, I think they do finally get together on New Year's Eve in this book and the movie, so that's one other similarity. But yes, if you're into this Nora Ephron hit classic and you want a modern take on can men and women be friends, as well as a story that explores other relationship types of questions, then pick this one up. It's also fitting to read in fall based on the cover alone, which oddly enough matches the movie poster for When Harry Met Sally, but also part of the story takes place during autumn. Alright, so the second movie and book pairing that I have listed is Notting Hill, which I'm pairing with Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. So I love British rom-coms and movies in general. I just really get that dry sense of humor for some reason. And yeah, so many jokes and comedy that are done in British movies in general make me laugh. And while I'm not obsessed with the celebrity normal person romance or Julia Roberts in general, I've rewatched Notting Hill time and time again. I honestly had a hard time finding a book to match this movie, I gotta say, as character-wise and overall tone, I couldn't think of any book I've read that matched closely enough to Notting Hill until I remembered this book. And the reason I'm pairing Funny You Should Ask with Notting Hill is because they do have a similar premise where the characters meet and spend a short amount of time together and then meet again. Although I think it's only months later in Notting Hill versus 10 years in Funny You Should Ask. And of course, Gabe and Anna are both movie stars, while Will and Channy are your more average citizens. And to be honest, the only other books I could think of where I've read the celebrity normal person trope is the Happy Ever After playlist and The Idea of You, and neither of those match well to Notting Hill because of the presence of other more emphasized themes and tropes. Not to mention that they ended up adapting The Idea of You last year. But anyways, if you want an Americanized version of Notting Hill that also has miscommunication, funny you should ask, this is the book for you. I know, guys, I'm trying real hard out here. What can I say? Okay, moving on to our third book movie pairing, I have Just Like Heaven, which I am pairing with The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This one was such a favorite of mine back in the early 2000s, and I really liked the chemistry between Reese Witherspoon and Mark Ruffalo in this movie. Also, it felt like Mark Ruffalo was cast in a lot of rom-coms during that time. He's more understated, yet he has that first romantic male lead quality about him. So anyways, when I first started reading The 7-Year Slip, it instantly reminded me of this movie. There's a very nostalgic and cozy feel to the way Ashley Poston wrote this book, and the magical realist concept of traveling back in time within the apartment felt similar enough to how he meets her in the apartment in Just Like Heaven. Although I did realize that her other book, The Dead Romantics, might be more similar because she actually connects with a ghost in that one, and I guess in Just Like Heaven, she's sort of in ghost form when he meets her in the apartment. However, the FMC also wasn't actually dead in Just Like Heaven. She was only in a coma, so she was still technically alive. I still haven't read The Dead Romantics yet, honestly, so I can't confirm which would be more similar. But again, the feeling and overall tone of The 7-Year Slip matched Just Like Heaven, as it kind of had the feel of they were always meant to end up together because of just various circumstances that happen in the story. So if you love atmospheric writing that really sets a cozy tone and setting, and you also love this movie Just Like Heaven, you will love this book. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. Okay, so the fourth pairing we have on this list is Love, Rosie, which I am pairing with the book One Day in December by Josie Silver. So this one is similar to the last pairing where I instantly was reminded of this movie when I read One Day in December. Now I know this is usually marketed as a Christmas book / holiday romance, but I would really not classify it as so. Because this is one of those stories that spans over decades, and we get to watch the MCs experience multiple stages of life, and especially multiple different relationships, except not with each other. And it's obvious how much our MCs belong together, yet they always end up with someone else, and the timing never works. It's a classic right person, always the wrong time kind of situation, so to speak, which is exactly what happens in Love, Rosie as well. While the movie has more of a childhood friends to lovers trope, the book emphasizes more of a love at first sight, where I believe she's sitting on the bus and spots him on the street. And then they meet again later in the story, obviously. But besides that, this book and movie have such a similar tone and plot progression of unexpected life events, falling for other people, and never being completely honest with the other person, even though their feelings are mutual. Both the book and movie have me screaming at our two mains to come to their senses, drop everything, and just be together. Not to mention that Sam Claflin is a dreamboat in everything. And honestly, guys, it's the accent and dimples that always get me, I gotta say. Also, I just want to say I do realize that Love, Rosie is already based on a book by Cecilia Ahern. But again, One Day in December felt similar enough to this movie, and just... yeah, the overall plot and tone reminded me more of Love, Rosie. Also, since both took place in England. So, if you love stories where you're cheering both characters on to be together as well as just as individuals, this is the one for you. And with that, let's keep things moving along with a bit of a different pairing, which is 500 Days of Summer, which I paired with the book Out of Love by Hazel Hayes. Not gonna lie, this one's not really high up there on my list of faves, but I put this on the list as I like how realistic this movie was in portraying the upward trend and eventual downfall of a relationship. This movie does lean more towards the dark side of funny, and in that you can highly relate to either of the main characters, but for some of us, we probably especially can relate to Tom, who we see experience all of the emotions of heartache, anger, resentment, and eventually comes to acceptance near the end after their breakup. I actually love one of the final scenes in the movie where Summer is telling Tom about how she met her husband, and she says that in the moment she realized Tom was right, but it just wasn't me he was right about. And obviously, I'm kind of paraphrasing that a bit here. I think this scene just encapsulates the obsession that we can have with someone else and how much we may hold on to all the good memories and intensity of the relationship, even if it wasn't meant to be in the end. And I think this was the scene where Tom finally starts to let go of her and move on with his life, even being open to someone new at the very end of the movie. I think these are all very real realizations that we all go through, especially if you've been in a serious romantic relationship. And while I love my lighthearted rom-coms within HEA, occasionally I like watching movies like this that hit you with the harder reality. And that's how I felt when I read Out of Love as well. Now, I will say, Out of Love is very different in the sense that it's told in backwards chronological order, where you start with them dealing with the breakup and end with the night they first met. Which I feel like this style of, chronological order can be a bit trippy for some people. But this was probably one of the more unique love stories I read so far. Also note, love story, not romance. And it goes through multiple different common issues in relationships. The way this story portrays the ups and downs of a relationship and being in love versus loving someone really reminded me of this movie, as, let's be honest, love is not the only component in real relationships. And honestly, I forgot how many good quotes there were in this book, but I'm going to share a few I found with you now. First quote, "We are both wounded in our own way, like a pair of tectonic plates shifting over time. Our wounds will gradually grate against one another's, causing damage at a glacial pace. Neither of us will notice until it's too late." Next quote, "I was supporting him when I needed support, and I was being made to feel responsible for all his problems. It was a microcosm of our entire relationship." And then the last one that I wrote down, "I know that staying with him doesn't mean I'm weak. I know it wasn't my fault. I know all this. But knowing something and believing something are two very different things. And part of me still blames myself for staying." Man, that is some hard-hitting truth right there. So yes, if you want a rom-com that's more real than romantic, either this movie or book is an excellent choice. Also, I know I keep dropping celebrity names in this episode, but Joseph Gordon-Levitt is still one of my celebrity crushes to this day, and I've loved almost every movie he's ever been in, including this one. And last but not least, in this Read This If You Like rom-com edition, we have 16 Candles, which I've paired with To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. Okay, let's be honest here. Hopefully you've seen either movie or read the book, or all the above, or at the least heard of either of these. So, you already know that 16 Candles is nothing like To All the Boys, in terms of the plot, tone, characters, etc. I honestly ended up throwing this one in because she clearly references 16 Candles, at least in the movie adaptation. I'm a bit fuzzy on the book now, if I'm going to be honest, as I read it a couple years ago at this point. But they even watched 16 Candles in To All the Boys, and Peter specifically says that he's, quote, way better looking than that guy, which, not gonna lie, is the truth in my humble opinion. Other than that, the only other similarities are that Laura Jean and Samantha are around the same age, and the fact that they both end up with the jock in these stories. I will say, though, 16 Candles is another one of those generic teen movies from the 80s where we don't know much about the two mains, except that we want them to end up together. Meanwhile, we hear a lot more about LJ and Peter's individual history and how they bond over that, especially with the absence of a parent in each of their childhoods. So it's easier to feel a lot more connected to them as characters and that sense of authenticity in their blossoming relationship in that story. And one thing I do want to add is that the movie adaptation of To All the Boys did utilize music from the 80s or had that same era feel, especially in the very last scene, which unfortunately I could not find the song title. And I fully realize I'm more so comparing movie to movie at this point. Excuse me. Especially because there were some major plot point changes between the book and movie for To All the Boys. But nevertheless, it's always good to go back to the original book since obviously it is the backbone for the movie. Although I feel like this is one of the rare cases where I actually did like the movie a bit better, at least in some ways. And with that, those are my 6 read this if you like recommendations for your fave rom-coms. Whether you like rom-coms, romance novels, or none of the above, I hope you found at least one new read to try. Or if you do know someone who likes rom-coms and romance novels, then maybe you found a new recommendation to give them. And I'm so glad I finally had the chance to make this episode, as it's an idea that was brewing in my head for a while, since I'm also a huge movie lover. And who knows, maybe in the future, I might extend this idea to other genres and types of media if you guys are interested. But otherwise, I'd love to hear which of these rom-coms or books is your favorite, or if you have another favorite that wasn't on this list, I'd love to hear that as well. And just want to make a few more notes. Next week's episode will be the last Valentine's coded topic, so stay tuned for that. Or if you're not as big a fan of the holiday, then stay tuned for what's to come in March. And final announcement before we go, starting with the next episode, we are going to be doing early release episodes on my subscription-based platform for those of you who can't wait until the next Tuesday to listen. I don't really plan on having a dedicated upload day, as some episodes take longer to record and edit than others, but rest assured that you will get early enough access to keep you up to date with all things fully booked. So if you want that perk, make sure to click the link in the show notes and subscribe if you haven't already, as I'll be posting a lot more on that page as the year goes on. And make sure you're following me on all my social media platforms as well, since I usually post updates for any new episode releases on any of them. But with all that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here for episode 25. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.